Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Study Study Club. This is David from Core Language, and I'm very happy to see you again. So today we're going to do something a little bit different than normal. Usually I'm doing a comic or a painting and talking about that. But today I'm going to answer some of your questions that I get about my teaching method. Why do I teach like this? What is this method? It's probably different than how you're used to being taught English. So let me tell you, this is what we're doing today. We're going to talk about the method. Let's take a look. Everything we do at Core Language is about helping you acquire the language. Acquire is like getting it, obtaining it. That language becomes your language. So it might be your second language or your third language or your fourth language, I don't know. But everything that I'm doing when I'm teaching is for you to make that language, the English language, your language. How do I do this? Okay, I will tell you about a man named Dr. Stephen Krashen. So here's a quote from this professor. He used to teach at the University of California. He was a linguistics professor. Linguistics is the study of language. And he said in his teaching that language acquisition, getting a language, obtaining a language, receiving a language, that becomes your language. Language acquisition occurs or happens in only one way, just one way, only one way to do it, by understanding messages. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean for you? Here's Dr. Stephen Krashen. So he's saying that if you're understanding the message, if that input, the message is the input. Input is someone talking to you, could be something you're listening to, could be something you're reading. But if that input is comprehensible, if it's understandable, if you understand that message of that input, then you will, over time, acquire that language. Do you understand? Let's talk some more about this. Stephen Krashen said, language is best taught when it's being used to transmit messages, not when it is explicitly taught for conscious learning. So I'm a teacher. So how do I teach you a language? How do I teach you English in the best way? I use my language to give you input, a message, to transmit, like to kind of send a message or give a message. I want to give you a message, give you some input that you can understand. And it's not best taught, it's not the best teaching when it is explicitly taught for conscious learning. Okay, what does that mean? Here's a teacher doing some explicit teaching, and you're familiar with this. You have spent time in a classroom. I have spent time in a language classroom. How effective is this? Stephen Krashen says it is not very effective because traditionally, normally, the teacher, the language teacher, will have you study grammar, will have a list of vocabulary with your first language and then translate it into the second language, a vocabulary list. Maybe you work on the phonics. You spend a lot of time trying to make perfect sounds with your mouth. Maybe the teacher gives you a lot of tests and a lot of drills and has you memorize things like a dialogue, between two people talking, and has you memorize that. This is a traditional way of teaching language. Dr. Krashen says this is not very effective. If you have been in one of these traditional language classes, I think we all have, you will likely have a teacher who is using your first language to tell you about the second language, the language you're trying to learn. In my case, it was Spanish. In the US where I'm from, they teach Spanish in the schools. And, you know, English and Spanish are pretty close. They're pretty close. They're different languages, but they're not so different. English and Arabic are really different. English and Chinese, English and Japanese are really different. But English to Spanish, not so different. So if I spend about 1,000 hours learning Spanish, I should be okay, you know. Maybe twice that for Japanese or Chinese. So I think I spent about 1,000 hours in a class, in Spanish classes in my lifetime. How's my Spanish? No bueno. That's Spanish for not good. And the reason why? Well, what's the reason? Because in the class, the teacher was using English to tell me about Spanish grammar, to tell me about Spanish vocabulary, to tell me about the Spanish syntax. Syntax is where the order of the words, where you would put the words. The syntax is different in Spanish and English. So you probably had this same experience. You're in the class. Let's say your first language is Chinese. Here's your teacher speaking to you in Chinese. Most of that class is in Chinese, and he's telling you about English and giving you tests. Okay, Dr. Stephen Krashen says this is not an effective way. And I can tell you from my own experience that it's not effective, and I think you probably can too. Most of my students say, I didn't learn anything. Or you learn a little. You will learn something, but you don't learn a lot. The reason why is that language acquisition is a subconscious thing. If you're conscious of something, you are aware of something, you know it's happening. If it's subconscious, you're not aware of it. And language learning is a subconscious process. If you're studying something and you're learning something, then you are very conscious of the fact that you are learning. But Stephen Krashen, Dr. Krashen said that language acquisition is something that happens subconsciously. So it's kind of a waste of time to study the language. This is why I call it the anti-study study club, because we're not really studying. And I'll explain more. What I do is give you comprehensible input. I want the input, the message, the thing I'm talking about to be understandable. Is it 100% understandable? Maybe for some of you. For most of you, maybe not 100%. But if you are a middle level, like a B level, you'll understand almost all of it. If you're an A level, you'll understand most of it, maybe some of it. If you're a C level, it's too easy, probably. But when I teach, my job is to give you input, give you a message that you can understand. Remember, Krashen said language acquisition, getting a language, that language is yours. Language acquisition happens in just one way, by understanding the message. So my job is to make the message, to make the input understandable. I want you to understand. So you see what I do. I use lots of pictures. We talk about comics. We talk about art. Sometimes I put the words on the screen to give you a little help. I do whatever I can to make this thing that I'm talking about, the message that I'm talking about, understandable. And if you understand, then your brain is starting to subconsciously acquire that language, the language of English. We have some blocks to acquiring language. According to Stephen Krashen, he calls it the affective filter, kind of like a wall that goes up. When we're stressed, when we're embarrassed, it's harder to learn. And I think you maybe have had this experience in your class. You have a lot of pressure to succeed. The teacher is going to give you a grade. Are you going to pass the class with an A, or are you going to fail the class? So there's pressure to learn. Maybe they call on you and say, you, speak beautifully. You're not ready to speak yet, and you feel embarrassed. You feel frustrated, like this guy. So those things are kind of a wall. They kind of put up a block to learning. This is why I like to teach the way I do. I don't want you to think I can't. These students think, I can't learn. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at English. I want you to think I can, because you really can. We all have these really wonderful brains. Your brain has over thousands of years of human evolution. Your brain has developed in a way to acquire languages. It's what humans do. This is what we do. Bears don't talk, tigers don't talk, humans talk. And so our brains are very, very good at acquiring languages. So all I have to do is give you a lot of input, because your brain is built for acquiring language. And if you understand that input, you will learn. The method I teach, you might see called TPRS, teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. Proficiency means you can do it. It's something that you know how to do. If you're proficient in something, you have an ability. So I'm teaching you the ability of speaking English through reading and storytelling. Mostly on these videos, it's storytelling. You do a little bit of reading, but it's mostly storytelling here. I encourage you to read. Stephen Krashen said if children, well, and adults, anybody, if anyone will read 1 million words in a year, at least 1,000 words will be added to their vocabulary. So you can build your vocabulary very quickly from reading. It's a very, very effective tool, but you must read at your level. You must read at your level. Don't try to read Shakespeare. You're not ready for Shakespeare if you are an A level or B level. Read a comic book, lots of pictures. Read a social media post. Read anything, really. Read anything. As long as you're understanding it, it's at your level. Keep reading. Keep reading. Reading is a wonderful thing to do, and so I always encourage my students to read. But you must read at your level. So here's our levels here. Most of the people that I talk to, I'm in Asia, so most people that I talk to here are probably A2 or B1 level. And so that's where I make my videos, for people at an A2 or B1 level, because most people I meet went to school, they learned some English at school, they've watched some American movies or British movies, and they've heard lots of English just from TV and social media. So they know a little bit of English for sure. Usually they're here, A2, B1. Of course, I meet people that are B2. A B2 person can have a conversation, no problem. We can have a conversation. Is their language perfect? No, but I understand them. They understand me. It's really great. It's wonderful to be at a B2 level. It does take time. You need at least 4,000 words. So if you're reading, you can add those words pretty quickly. If you're watching my videos and you're C level, you're advanced or you've mastered English. So my videos are probably kind of too easy for you. But the biggest thing is getting that input. So you need that input to acquire the language. So spend time in the language. Spend a lot of time in that language with authentic speech and texts. Authentic means real. So real people speaking real English, reading novels, reading articles, reading interviews, whatever you like to read. I listen to a lot of things like podcasts and audiobooks. If you listen to the audiobook and read the book at the same time, wow, that's so great. That's so powerful. But spend time with that, and you need to spend time. How long will it take? It really depends. It depends on you. So remember in the beginning, I said it takes about 1,000 hours to learn Spanish. Um, so if I wanted to learn Spanish, my Spanish is not very good. If I wanted to learn Spanish, it would take me about this long. I could do that in a little over 1 year if I had 2 hours a day. If I only had 1 hour a day, it's going to take a little less than 3 years. If I only had 20 minutes a day, it's going to take me a little less than 9 years. So it really depends how much time do you have to spend in the language. This is not a good use of your time. And the reason why is that you're not really in the language for very long in this class. Most of this class is explaining the grammar, explaining the syntax, giving you lists of vocabulary to memorize and testing you. This is not an effective use of your time. You can maximize your time. You can learn faster with this method, with the TPRS method or comprehensible input method. So you get the most of your time if you're learning from a teacher who can teach you in this way, in this comprehensible input way. Not that they will never use your first language, sometimes they will, but the class is mostly, or maybe all, but it's mostly in the second language, the language you're trying to learn. It's the better use of your time. And I wish there were more teachers who are teaching this way. I encourage you, if you teach Chinese, if you teach Japanese, if you teach Spanish, look into this. It's a really wonderful thing to do for your students. I always say if you're understanding, you're learning. I could also say you're acquiring, right? You're acquiring that language. So I speak, my job is to help you understand. I use lots of pictures. I'll put words up. I will do anything I can to help you understand. And when you understand, that language is subconsciously getting into your brain, our beautiful brains that are built for acquiring language. And when the learner, when the student has acquired enough language, then they will naturally begin to speak. So speaking is not going to get you to learn the language. Speaking might help you become more fluent, but you're going to work on that fluency after you've acquired enough language. So there is going to be a period of time that's relatively silent for the student. Getting students to speak and speak and speak is not how you get them to learn. Give them the input, let them acquire all the words, the grammar, the syntax, all that stuff. Acquire all of that language through comprehensible input, and then naturally they will start to use it. Naturally, they will begin to produce original sentences. Simple at first and more complicated the more language they acquire. And that is the method. That is the method. So you can learn English if you want to. If you want to take the time to do it, you can. Your brain can. It's not about talent. It's not about intelligence. You don't have to be smart to learn a language. You don't have to be talented to learn the language. You just need enough input enough comprehensible input, and you will, over time, you will learn the language. Okay, here's another question I get. Why don't you use subtitles in your videos? A lot of people ask me this. The reason why I do this, if you were taking a class with me in person, if we were together in the same room learning, there wouldn't be subtitles, right? I wouldn't have subtitles under me if we were in the same room, person to person, learning live. So that's why I don't really do it in the videos. In the real world, we don't always have the luxury of subtitles. So I do my best to make it comprehensible, to make it understandable. And if you're understanding most of it, good, keep going, because that's how you will acquire the language. All right, so that's very briefly the method. I encourage you to do an internet search for Dr. Stephen Krashen. I encourage you to do an internet search for comprehensible input, TPRS. I encourage you to do an internet search for some other teachers I really like, some other people that are on the internet kind of promoting this idea. Steve Kaufman is a wonderful person. Maybe you know him. He's a polyglot. Polyglot means you speak many, many languages. He speaks several languages very well. He promotes this idea of learning in this method. You can search for him. He's a Canadian man, businessman, who just speaks lots of languages. Look for him. There's a woman named Baniko Mason. She was a professor at a university in Osaka, Japan. She taught all of her students and did a lot of research uh, about this method. She was just telling them stories. She told them stories in English. She made it comprehensible by drawing. She called it story learning. So in the classroom, she just told stories to them and they listened. And then she had a very large library of books that were at their level that they could read. And that's how her students learned. Her classes tested very high. They got very high scores, same or better than students in traditional language classes. So the research shows that this is effective. Not only is it effective, I think it's more enjoyable. I think you have a better experience and you have a better time listening to stories and getting input about things that are interesting. If you're interested in art and interested in cartoons, great. You're at the right place because that's what I'm talking about lately. Maybe next time I'll talk about movies or something else, but I want the input to be interesting to you. So you kind of forget that you're learning. We're never studying here. This is not really studying English. I'm just giving you the input so that you can acquire English effortlessly in a relaxed way, no pressure, no stress, no tests. So you see at the beginning, there's this burning book. This does not mean burn all books. Please don't misunderstand. This burning book is like a burning like a study book, like a grammar book. I had so many grammar books and it didn't help me learn Spanish. I had so many textbooks and they did not help me learn Spanish. What would help me learn Spanish is someone teaching me in a comprehensible input way with a TPRS method. That would be very effective. And if you know any Spanish teachers that teach like this, send me a message. Teach me Chinese like this. Teach me any language. I would be happy to learn in this way. I wish there were more teachers that would teach in this method. So I'm here really to show you, to demonstrate the method, to promote the method, and hopefully more and more language teachers will start to do this. Less about the testing, less about the grammar, less about the talking about the language in your first language, more about giving you lots and lots and lots of input that you can understand so that you can acquire the language. And you will acquire the language if you spend time in the language. Got it? Okay. That's my method, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Next time we'll do something that I usually do, but I just wanted to make a video to explain things. Search Mr. Crashin here. He's my hero. All right. I'll see you next time. Have a great day.